2. We're on lake 40 of the Northern Hemisphere sort of loop around. Today we're flying from Umiujaq in Canada, flying north up to Cape Dorset. Both airfields are just gravel strips in the middle of nowhere, so not an awful lot to see there. Low level as well. I didn't really think again that there's going to be much benefit for doing any low level stuff down there. It's fairly flat down there, and the weather's quite poor as well. We had some sleety rain on there and takeoff. I'm expecting that further along as well. You can see that on the radar, but we've got that happening down below us anyway. So at the moment we're up around 15,000 feet cruising. We've actually got quite a good wind behind us now. It's not completely behind, but we've got ground speed of 215 knots. So that's all pretty good there. So we have got some air traffic out to the right. Whether it's actually showing up outside or not, it seems to be a bit of an anomaly at the moment. We never seem to know if we're actually going to get these air traffic show up anywhere. Sometimes it shows on the EFB, sometimes it shows up on the MFD, sometimes it actually shows outside. Very rarely does it do all three. Minus 18 degrees outside at the moment, but we're in quite clear air, so we're not suffering with icing. Fluid control is off at the moment, just got the pitot heating on, but keeping an eye on what's going on, make sure we don't ice up. Rather than the usual cruise today, I haven't got Emma, who's the normal sort of air hostess, trolley dolly back. I've got a tour guide on there today, so they keep giving me a little bit of information about places we're passing over, although there's not an awful lot to see. It do get a little bit sort of repetitious, but nice to get some information. Bit of a problem today, we haven't got Steve. We have passengers, but no Steve. As I said in part one, I think it's because I've got Humans add-on active at the moment, so that seems to be affecting it. But not to worry, so we're flying as if it's a single crew today anyway, which you can do in the 208s. I am using the button to speak to Steve though, as if he's on a ground radio frequency, so if I do need any calculations doing, I should use that. So, Sarah, not spoken to you before, first time we've had you on one of our flights, so welcome to the flights. So you'd like to tell me, whereabouts are you from then?
Thank you for the warm welcome. I'm actually from Montreal, so I'm used to a little snow and a lot of poutine. Makes me perfectly qualified for northern adventures like this one.
Poutine's quite nice. I did have my tea last night, actually, just by coincidence, Tutriere, which is another Canadian dish, as you well know. I should have had poutines with it, but we didn't, we just had vegetables.
Poutine and tea make quite the Canadian combo. Next time you'll have to try poutine with your vegetables. Just don't blame me if you get hooked on cheese curds and gravy.
It was the Tutriere that we had last night, the Canadian kind of minced pork pie.
Tourtière is a classic French-Canadian meat pie, usually made with minced pork or a mix of meats, and it's a staple at holiday gatherings in Quebec.
It's very nice. I did have requests to make it again. That's why we had it last night. It's just the allspice, ground cloves and cinnamon in there just make it very different to any other pie. It's very, very nice.
Those spices really do make tourtière stand out from any other meat pie. It's a real taste of Quebec tradition.
After that, we did have, I had some in the freezer left over from previously, but it's the Nanaimo bars, another Canadian favourite.
Ah, the Nanaimo bar. That's a classic Canadian dessert with a crumbly base, custard-flavored middle, and chocolate topping. No baking required.
It's very nice, and my partner certainly appreciates it as I'm flying around all these different places around the world. Stopping somewhere, I will cook something from that local country. So she's quite happy with that.
That sounds like a delicious way to travel the world. Your partner is lucky to have a chef and a pilot all in one.
Do you have any more points of interest coming up for us and the passengers?
We're flying over a pretty remote area right now, but as soon as there's another point of interest coming up, I'll be sure to let everyone know.
You wouldn't happen to know if there's any specialty local foods local to our destination there, Cape Dorset?
Cape Dorset, now known as Kinngait, is famous for its Inuit art and also for traditional foods like Arctic char, caribou, and seal. These are staples in the local diet and often enjoyed smoked, dried, or cooked in stews.
Well, it actually looks as if that flight behind us is actually a real flight there. I've just seen the game tag over there, so that's something.
559, contact Edmonton Center on 118.4.
118.4, United 559. Edmonton Centre, good morning, United 559 with you, flight number 150.
Air Inuit 542, descend and maintain altitude 2500.
United 559, Edmonton Center identified. Good morning, Puvernatuck altimeter 2983.
Steve, could you tell me how long it would take to get to our destination airport with the current speed of 216 knots?
At 216 knots, it'll take about 2 hours and 8 minutes to reach our destination.
Thanks, Steve. So 2 hours and 8 minutes. We're going to look at probably about an hour and 10 on this leg, which was what I was kind of expecting.
Since we're in remote northern Quebec, the closest spot of note is the village of Umiujaq. Umiujaq is located on a peninsula that juts out into Hudson Bay, and its name means central prong of a kakavak, a traditional Inuit fishing spear in Inuktitut. The village is only accessible by air or sea, and the airport here is a lifeline for the community. Umiujaq was established in the 1970s and is home to about 600 people, most of whom are Inuit. From the air, you can spot the unique layout of the village, shaped by the rugged coastline and the surrounding tundra.
Steve, based on our current speed of 214 knots, how long will it take us to travel 160 nautical miles?
At 214 knots, it'll take about 45 minutes to cover 160 nautical miles.
So you might need a little bit more than that then. So we're coming up to Leiden, so we'll then have Lexi. So it'll take us past Lexi towards Kepler.
lies near Umiujaq. Let me tell you about the airport itself. Umiujaq Airport is a key hub for the Nunavik region, and it's one of the busiest airports in northern Quebec, even though it's surrounded by tundra as far as the eye can see. The airport was built in the 1970s and is absolutely vital for the community, since there are no roads connecting Umiujaq to the rest of Quebec. Everything from groceries to mail to medical supplies comes in by air, so you could say the runway is the town's lifeline. Pilots flying in and out here get to experience some of the most challenging weather in Canada, especially during those long Arctic winters.
Out on the sides of them, the clouds look quite nice, very pretty. They looked a little bit pixelated earlier, not too bad again now. Still, the odd time they're a little bit pixelated, a bit closer up. A mile away from Agbix. Our next fix will be quite a long one. Lexic 136. Just going to turn it to the right so that it gives us a bit of a help with the wind behind. Although it's dropped down now from 41 to 36.
major landmarks right beneath us, let me tell you about the closest community, which is Umiujaq. This Inuit village is located along the coast of Hudson Bay and is only accessible by air, making its airport a vital hub for supplies, travel, and even medical emergencies. Umiujaq's name comes from the Inuktitut word, meaning putrefied, a nod to a local legend about a beached whale. The area is famous for its Inuit art, especially stone carvings and prints that are collected worldwide. The airport here was built in the 1970s, and pilots flying in get to experience some of the most challenging Arctic weather in Canada. stretch of northern Quebec. The closest spot of note is the village of Umiujaq. Umiujaq sits on a peninsula that juts into Hudson Bay, and its name means central prong of a kakivak. That's a traditional Inuit fishing spear, in case you were wondering. The village was established in the 1970s and is home to about 600 people, most of whom are Inuit. It's only accessible by air or sea, so the airport here is a lifeline for the community. From the air, you might notice the unique layout of the village, shaped by the rugged coastline and the surrounding tundra.
Strange. Looks good for icing, no problems there. Fuel about half the quantity, that's good stuff into there. Engine oils and everything, all look good.
remote stretch of northern Quebec, let me tell you about the closest community, which is the village of Umiujaq. Umiujaq sits on a peninsula that juts out into Hudson Bay, and its name means central prong of a kakivak, which is a traditional Inuit fishing spear. The village was established in the 1970s and is home to about 600 people, most of whom are Inuit. It's only accessible by air or sea, so the airport here is a lifeline for the community. From above, you might notice the unique layout of the village, shaped by the rugged coastline and the surrounding tundra. The area is known for its dramatic Arctic scenery. On a clear day, you can see the endless expanse of Hudson Bay stretching out to the horizon. Since we're flying over a remote stretch of northern Quebec with no major landmarks directly beneath us, let me tell you about the closest airport, which is Umiujaq Airport. This gravel airstrip was built in the 1970s and is absolutely vital for the community of Umiujaq, as there are no roads connecting it to the rest of Quebec. Everything from groceries to mail arrives by plane, so the runway is basically the town's main street. Pilots who land here get to experience some of the most challenging Arctic weather in Canada.
Otherwise it's going to change in front of us before too long, 50 odd miles away. We have to keep an eye out for icing conditions then. plenty cold enough with that moisture up there, that could start to cause problems. We'll keep an eye on that. Just noticed that the ignition's on, just so that's normal.
Since there aren't any major landmarks right beneath us, let me tell you about the closest airport, which is Salouet Airport. Salouet Airport was built in the 1970s and is a lifeline for the remote Inuit community of Salouet in northern Quebec. There are no roads connecting Salouet to the rest of Quebec, so the airport is the main way people and supplies come and go. The runway is gravel, which makes for some bumpy landings, especially in the winter, when snow and wind can make things extra exciting. Pilots who fly up here have to be ready for some of the most challenging weather in Canada.
All the passengers seem to be happy back there.
Absolutely. Keeping the passengers happy has always been a top priority. Whether it's with a smooth flight, a good story, or just a smile and a snack. any major landmarks right beneath us, let me tell you about the closest airport, which is Salouet Airport. Salouet Airport was built in the 1970s and is a lifeline for the remote Inuit community of Salouet in northern Quebec. There are no roads connecting Salouet to the rest of Quebec, so the airport is the main way people and supplies come and go.
Contact Montreal Center on 134.725.
134.725, United 559. Montreal Centre, United 559. Good afternoon. With you, flight number 150. It's probably still more than that.
United 559, Montreal Centre identified. Good morning, Salouet altimeter 2971.
Lots of fly splatters on the wings, which is a bit surprising really for flight number 150, but still no sign of icing yet. might do.
Since we're flying in the far north of Quebec, the closest spot of note is the village of Salouit. Salouit is one of the northernmost communities in Quebec, and its name means the thin ones in Inuktitut, a reference to a time when food was scarce. The village is nestled in a valley surrounded by rugged hills and is only accessible by air, making the airport a true lifeline for the community. Salouit was established as a trading post in the 1920s, and today it's home to about 1,500 people, most of whom are Inuit. The area is known for its dramatic Arctic scenery. On a clear day, you can see the endless expanse of tundra and the winding rivers that snake through the landscape.
Right, maybe not the most realistic thing to do, but I've just turned off the heating on the windscreen, ventilation, and so hopefully I might see a bit of icing on there if we get icing conditions. I know you should see it on the wing as well anyway, but very often you do see it appearing on the windscreens first. I am expecting it, with it being minus 24 and clouds, I'm expecting some icing up here. Well, if the Sims weather modelling does tell any truth there, those rainbow arcs there should say there's a lot of moisture about up here. So it might see the signs of icing in a moment. Alright, 2 miles away now from Leipzig. Should be turning to Seedon then, which will be 131 away. That's it, making the turn now. You see on the radar there was a gap over there between the weather, then we've got another pillar there, that looks like another heavy part, but we're going to be heading over towards these bits, so I'm expecting to go through some rain, moisture, precipitation of one description or another. Okay, it's levelled out there, so we call that an end to this part 2 of Lake 42. So see you in a few minutes on part 3.